Hello ladies and gentlemen and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host, Brett Murphy, and for today's video, it is going to be another Cinema Showdown. For today's showdown, it is going to be Murder on the Orient Express versus Death on the Nile. Now, just to clarify, we are talking about the 2017 and 2022 versions of these movies. None of the other versions will be considered. So Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile are two very famous Agatha Christie novels, which have both been recently adapted for modern times, directed by and starring Kenneth Branagh. So which one of these murder mystery whodunnits did a better job at capturing our hearts? Well, it's time to find out. I also want to say right here, right now, that I am issuing a major spoiler warning. I will be talking in great detail about every single aspect of both of these movies, including the recently released Death on the Nile. That means the killer is going to be revealed, all cards are on the table, no holds barred. So you have been warned. Before I hop into the actual showdown itself, I just wanted to let you all know that I have an entire playlist dedicated to all of my Cinema Showdown. So be sure to check that out, and I guarantee you'll find something you like. And so without further ado, let's hop right into things. One last thing I wanted to mention before we got into the actual showdown. I know that there are plenty of lifelong Agatha Christie fans out there who are very concerned on how well these movies adapted their source material. Though I won't be including a round on that in this showdown, I did do my research and it appears that Murder on the Orient Express is indeed the more accurate to the source material. So you have that for what it's worth, but the rest of the showdown will be focused on the movie adaptations only. Round 1. Characters. Both of these movies boast star-studded casts, but which one put theirs to better use? Both, of course, are directed by and star Kenneth Branagh as the world-renowned detective Hercule Poirot. Murder on the Orient Express includes a supporting cast with the likes of Johnny Depp, Daisy Ridley, Josh Gad, Dame Judi Dench, Willem Dafoe, Penelope Cruz, Olivia Colman, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Leslie Odom Jr. If hearing that cast blows your mind, it should. It blew my mind when I first heard it was announced. But sadly, they are virtually all severely underutilized. The star of the show is very much so Branagh, and he shines. I do find he hams it up a bit more in this one than he does in the sequel. His accent early on feels a bit goofier, and it focuses a lot more on his OCD-like tendencies. His right-hand man in this one is Tom Bateman as Book, and I liked him a lot less in this one as well. He just feels far more arrogant and pompous, and doesn't really get much to do aside from be the rich kid whose uncle gave him control of the train. Johnny Depp is just a simple crook who gets killed pretty early on. Josh Gad gets like one good scene. Michelle Pfeiffer is probably the best of the bunch. As I mostly forget the rest or even the movie, they're given so little to do. Death on the Nile stars Kenneth Branagh once again, as I said, but I feel he really hit a sweet spot with the character in this one. Clever, cunning, and appropriately egotistical, but he's also given some fantastic emotional beats that got me pretty good. Alongside him for this voyage is Gal Gadot, Armie Hammer, Emma Mackey, Rose Leslie, Annette Bening, Letitia Wright, Russell Brand, Sophie Okonedo, Jennifer Saunders, and Dawn French, as well as Tom Bateman returning as Book. This may not be as big of an all-star cast as the first one, not as many well-known names. But that doesn't mean that they can't deliver, because most of them absolutely do. Not all of them are given as much time as I would have liked, but most of them make very good use of the time that they are given. Gal, Armie, even though he's pretty blacklisted by Hollywood right now, and Emma Mackey are all superb. I am especially stoked for Emma Mackey as I am a huge fan of the Netflix original series, Sex Education. Book is a much better character here as a determined, classy, and love-struck puppy. Letitia Wright and Sophie Okonedo astound as an aunt and niece duo. The rest really do have their moments, at least one exceptional scene each, but don't get quite as much time as the other stars. This flick overall just had much better themes of love, tragedy, and greed, while also handling some very heavy emotional moments that actually got me. Plain and simple, I'm going to be giving this first round to Death on the Nile. Though Murder on the Orient Express arguably has the bigger stars, Death on the Nile just puts its supporting cast to better use. I also felt that the sequel had the better versions of both Poirot and Book. Round 2. Setting. Set on the world-famous Orient Express with a stunning winter backdrop, our group of supposed strangers find themselves trapped on board with a dead body after an avalanche leaves them stranded on their way to France in 1934. The train itself is classy, filled with beautiful decor, and all of the food and liquor that one could possibly dream of, with tight, claustrophobic rooms and hallways to help our characters feel trapped like rats as they sit atop a snowy mountain waiting to be freed. This wintry setting has our characters dressed in lavish suits, fluffy fur coats, and most of them are packing a different kind of heat. Death on the Nile, as the title suggests, is the exact opposite. Instead set within Egypt, primarily on a river streamer on the Nile in 1937. Sunshine, palm trees, pyramids, and lots of sand. Even if the CGI and green screen effects aren't always that great. The vast majority of our runtime is spent on a glamorous river streamer calmly floating down the Nile River day and night. The streamer itself is gorgeous, inside and out, very much so fit for the wealthy and beautiful. The characters are dressed head to toe in their finest suits and dresses, partying to some enchanting jazz and sipping on cocktails all along the river. Although I do feel that the costume design is better in Death on the Nile, I'm going to be giving this second round to Murder on the Orient Express. Look, I'm a cold and snow kind of guy. The winter is my favorite season of the year, so the setting is perfect for me. I love the snowy landscapes, the blizzard, and the dark, dreary, and claustrophobic feel of the train, and you just don't really get that with the river streamer. Round 3. Build up. When it comes to these murder mystery whodunits, the build up to the big death that the whole plot centers around is key. We need to be intrigued and invested, so which of these two had the better setup? Murder on the Orient Express opens up at the Jerusalem Wailing Wall, where Detective Hercule Poirot quickly solves a big crime to prove to the audience just how efficient and impressive his skill set is. From there, he tries to take a vacation, but after bumping into his old friend Book and receiving a telegram of a case for him to solve, he finds himself on the world-famous Orient Express. We get a very brief crash course into who each character is, a quick glimpse into their personalities, and some mild background talk alluding to plot points that will come into play later. The storm kicks in, derailing our train, and around 40 minutes in, we find our dead body. Death on the Nile takes a slightly different approach. It starts off with a 15-minute or so black and white flashback to World War I, where we get the origin story to Hercule Poirot's iconic mustache, alongside finally meeting the only previously mentioned Catherine, the now deceased love of his life. From there, we spend some time with Gal Gadot, Armie Hammer, and Emma Mackey as we discover their little love triangle. After once again running into his friend Book and being invited to Gal and Armie's wedding, he finds himself caught up in the lovers' quarrel. After a desperate escape to the water for some peace of mind, things turn south as the beautiful heiress winds up dead. Although I feel Death on the Nile gives us a bit more time with our colorful cast of characters before the big turning point, I think I'm going to have to give this round to Murder on the Orient Express. Death on the Nile just takes a little too much time to get to the point. Murder on the Orient Express just gives us exactly what we need to get us hooked in, plants the seeds for things later revealed, and then boom, we're right into it. Round 4. Subplots. I decided to throw this round in here because the big mystery isn't all that is at play in these whodunits. Since there isn't normally a second act, they often tend to have these subplots interwoven throughout the build-up before the murder, as well as after the murder during the investigation. More is typically revealed. With Poirot doing all kinds of digging, which of these two mysteries offered up the more interesting side plots? Murder on the Orient Express really has one big side plot that slowly begins to connect some of our characters. There is a black and white flashback sequence that follows the Armstrong family whose daughter has been kidnapped for ransom. Despite them paying that ransom, they find that their daughter has been murdered. Heartbroken and distraught, the mother goes into premature labor and her and the baby die in childbirth, and the grieving husband later takes his own life. Shortly thereafter, we discover that Depp's character was using a fake identity and is indeed the child murderer. There's also a shoehorned-in love story between Daisy Ridley and Leslie Odom Jr. Willem Dafoe sports a fake accent in order to conceal his real identity, and the Countess, who is only seen like once or twice, is found to be a drug addict. Death on the Nile starts off right away by expanding Poirot's backstory. We dive into a black and white retelling of a World War I battle in which Poirot is hit by an explosive, permanently scarring his face, thus why he grows out his iconic mustache. In this, we also meet the only previously mentioned and not explicitly shown Catherine, Poirot's long-lost love. We also have a subplot following Book's love for Rosalie and desperately trying to seek his mother's approval, while also stealing a very valuable necklace in order for them to run away together. It is also revealed that Bowers is not just her nurse, but is in fact Marie Van Schuyler's lover. This is admittedly a smaller subplot, and there are a few other smaller ones in here as well, that include Russell Brand being the former fiancé to Gal Gadot, and Rose Leslie having her own engagement called off after Gal bribes her fiancé to prove that he wasn't all that loyal. And if you wish, you could also count the 2 other deaths in the movie as subplots too. It is clear to see which of these 2 has more to offer in terms of holding your interest before the investigation and during its downtimes. This round will be going to Death on the Nile. Murder on the Orient Express just didn't have enough besides its central mystery, which at times led to it feeling like the longer movie, even though it's the shorter one. There's just a bit more at play in Death on the Nile that always kept your mind racing until the big reveal. Final round, the payoff. So how does this big mystery pay off? When all is finally revealed, are we satisfied with the conclusion? Did we figure it out ourselves? Did all of the clues line up? Murder on the Orient Express gets complicated when all of the cards are finally on the table at the end. There's this whole kidnapping, murder, suicide subplot about a family that we see in flashbacks that we just recently discussed, that to me personally really just kind of muddies things up. Look, I get it. It makes sense because the killers need their motive, and this is the way that the novel was originally written. But when the big reveal drops that it was all of them, that this had all been planned from the very beginning except for Poirot coming on board and the avalanche, I honestly felt very underwhelmed. I felt that this whole bit was just introduced too late into the movie, and the final interrogation scene just drags on for far too long, as it becomes incredibly bogged down by the exposition-heavy tangent that Poirot goes on, whilst loosely connecting the dots to this needlessly convoluted reveal that left me feeling cheated. Look, once again, I get that this is how the book plays out, but in this round here, we are talking strictly about how the movie handles it. Not gonna lie, Death on the Nile was very easy to figure out. I guessed it pretty early on and I was spot on with exactly who did it and why they did it. But truthfully, that didn't make the journey any less enjoyable. As a matter of fact, this movie does so well at throwing you off its scent that there were multiple times that I actually doubted myself. However, I kept my guess locked in and I celebrated my victory. No convoluted connecting of the dots or subplots needed. You are just locked in beginning to end with Poirot as he tries to get all the clues together and solve this murder mystery. We get some superb character moments throughout, emotions of every kind are riding very high, multiple other murders occur and then it ends on a tragic double suicide. When this is really the whole point of your movie, you really need to stick the landing. And for me, Murder on the Orient Express just couldn't pull it off quite as gracefully. So I'll be giving the 5th and final round and the crown to Death on the Nile. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my winner. While you're at it, feel free to let me know who you would have chosen to win each of these rounds and who your overall winner was, and let me know what Cinema Showdown you'd like to see me do next. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button, and if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe, thank you so much for watching, and that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.